Digit deficit. When we all start talking about the 49ers being unable to come from behind, we're not talking about a 4-point come from behind situation. We're talking about double-digit deficits. That was Keyshawn Johnson on Undisputed this morning. So,
okay.
Atta babe, Key. Joining us right now from The Athletic, the beat writer, 4-year San Francisco 49ers. He was front and center for everything. Matt Barrows. Matt, whew, that's all I got to say.
Yeah, he wanted more anxiety.
Yeah.
Wasn't enough. Let's have a real comeback. Yeah.
Matt, you are a journalist with a capital J. I'm just honestly curious. This is probably a super unfair question, but you've also been around this team and you're a human being and you follow them and you cover them and you know them personally. Like, are you able to not stress out during is there a switch you can turn on, or do you just stress out but deal with it?
I stress out, but there's a different root cause to my stress. I mean, we have to file things right at the end of games, and you file it sort of in the vein of, okay, did they win or did they lose? And so a game like that where it's in the balance, you don't know what you're writing, and you've got to get down 8 floors to a press conference. And so that's my stress. You know, whether they win or they lose, I'm not so much stressing out about that as much as, oh, what am I going to write here? And sometimes I have to write very quickly. So there's definitely stress in a close game, but not the same stress that a fan is going through.
Well, and I'm thinking, Matt, as you're doing this, you're probably formulating ideas and angles and stories. And so for a portion of that game, you're probably formulating, okay, a number 1 seed, a great year, but it's going to end because it did look like they might lose that game. What would have been some of your reasons why, if it in fact went that way?
Yeah, for sure. And I was doing exactly that. And earlier in the week, I had written a story about, you know, the 49ers don't have a lot of weaknesses, but there are some, and these are the small cracks in this machine. And just about every one of them raised their head in that game. I mean, kickoff coverage was, and special teams was my number one item in that, and kickoff coverage was terrible. I don't know why they challenged the Green Bay Packers of all teams. They had the leading kick returner in the league. The guy's going to the Pro Bowl probably. And they decided, let's challenge this guy. And it did not work out. So that was bad. And then, I said, I had written that story on a Monday, and I said, there's a chance of rain this weekend, and Purdy isn't very good in the rain. And I think that came to bear too. Number 3 cornerback. That was another one. And it was clear that the Packers decided, okay, if we're going to target one guy, it's going to be Ambry Thomas. And they targeted him, and they were right. So those are things that the 49ers have to worry about against the Lions as well. I mean, I wasn't giving Matt LaFleur a guide for his game plan. I mean, these things were season long and obvious, and the 49ers obviously were trying to change that number 3 cornerback situation up. They were excited about Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett would have been in the starting lineup or in the rotation for this game against the Packers had he not suffered a rotator cuff injury. So, I mean, these are the guys that are going to be on the 49ers for the NFC Championship, and if they win it, and for the Super Bowl as well.
Well, also, the other thing that reared its ugly head was being down in the fourth quarter as we kind of started the interview, and they took care of that. Now we hear that there's no hairline fracture, as was feared for Deebo Samuel. They say he's a 50-50 chance to play. Matt, I'd said just before we went to break, you, of course, feel free to push back on me. You know better. This sounds like one of those, either he's going to be playing and fine, or they're going to take out the big mighty needle and shove him full of God knows what that I wouldn't want to touch, but football players will take to go out and play. I find it hard to believe if he doesn't have a hairline fracture that he wouldn't be playing against the Lions.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you look back to 2021, that was a season where, Deebo just kind of took over. And the whole offense was geared around him. And by the end of that season, remember that Green Bay game in the snow, he was in and out of that game like 3 or 4 times. It was this, it was that. He was beat up as anybody on that team. And he kept playing, the following week in LA, and had to come out of that game as well. So yeah, he's one of those guys that I think you're going to have to, wild horses are going to have to drag him off the field. So yeah, I expect if there's a chance that he plays, he plays. He also has I don't know if he has a running feud, but there were some words spoken about him by one of the Lions defensive backs, and those types of things always get Tebow fired up. You saw how he played in Philadelphia earlier this season. So yeah, all those things together, if there's a chance, I think he's going to play.
Talking with Matt Barrows, again brought to you by Stockton Honda, Northern California's #1 Honda dealer. In a game that they win by 3, Matt, and made enough defensive plays. Obviously, the 2 interceptions by Greenlaw were critical. The fact that the 2 early drives held them to field goals, those were important. But overall, not a lot of pressure on Jordan Love. No sacks. The situation where I didn't feel like they had the impact defensively, and a ton of pass interference calls against the group. What did you think about the defensive performance?
Yeah, for a while there, especially the first half, I thought that, I think this was sort of a catch-all for the whole team. I mean, we were talking about rest versus rust, and the 49ers did their best to sort of keep things sharp. They had really intense practices over their bye week, one of which they put on the pads, which you never hear about. You never hear about it from, late November onward, much less in January. So Shanahan was cognizant of that and guarded against it, but I just don't think, I don't know if it's addressable, if it's curable when you have all that time off. And I thought that the Packers were the team that was in rhythm, in sync, and the 49ers weren't. And I think the defense was part of that. But you're right. I mean, a lot of pressures on Jordan Love. I think a different quarterback, you would have seen some of those sacks. I think he did a good job of getting rid of the ball. He looked really good in the first half, but at the end of the game, he's got 194 passing yards, and he's got 2 interceptions, and his passer rating is 72.4. So, the 49ers eventually did a good job against this passing game. The running game was something totally different. 136 yards total. Aaron Jones with 108, 53 coming on 1 run. That's something that the 49ers just hadn't given up all season. I know, and they were worried about Jones going into the game. They saw what he did against the Cowboys. But you would have thought that they would have gotten on that. That's something that they've been really good at over the last 3 seasons. And they had Eric Armstead back. And Eric Armstead, I thought, played really well. So there was just something off there. I think Chase Young coming in for Cleveland Farrell was part of that. But again, it was just sort of a half step behind for most of the game. But then at the end, both sides of the ball started to pick it up. And so the hope, obviously, for the 49ers is that, okay, we had that rest versus rust issue. We took an entire game to sort of work through it, and now we're back to where we were. That's a hope. I don't know if that's going to be possible. Once you kind of stop that momentum, is it possible to kind of retrieve it and get it back?
Matt Barrows with us. That kind of leads into my question. You mentioned Brock Purdy's struggles in the rain. Not sure quite yet what the forecast is. I haven't looked for Santa Clara next weekend, but do you leave that game worried about Brock Purdy, or do you think, like you just said, they might have figured it out? And is that something that Niner fans really need to look at going into Detroit?
I don't think it's going to rain, and it's well documented that once the heavens open up, Brock Purdy doesn't play very well, and he admitted to, he was wearing a glove on the sideline, then he took it off, didn't love it. So there's some insecurity there when it rains, and I thought that the way that he finished up that game, was obviously encouraging. But yeah, I mean, that's a big deal because, in future seasons, you're going to run into bad weather here, even in California. It rains in California in the winter. You might have to go up to Green Bay. You might have to play in New York. You might have to play in Philadelphia. Those types of situations. So I think the silver lining in those clouds is that it's supposed to be 68 degrees on Sunday, and it's not supposed to rain, and it could be sunny. So peak Brock Purdy weather, and the hope is that he looks like October Brock instead of January Brock.
Matt, how do you think the matchup will look this weekend? What are some of the things that the Niners can do to the Lions on Sunday?
Well, I mean, we saw what the Packers didn't really have a number one receiver. I know that Romeo Doubs is probably their best guy, but they spread the ball around. The Lions like to go after one guy, and the 49ers have had some success in having Charvarius Ward follow the opponent's number one receiver around the field. I wonder whether that's a solution to their number three cornerback problem. The Lions run the ball really well. I think their rookie has gotten better and better as the season's gone on. So, I mean, Dan Campbell's going to do what he does best, which is run the ball and try to kind of bloody up the opponent. That those 108 yards to Aaron Jones, I think, are really going to catch the Lions' attention and make them think that, hey, you know what, we too can run the ball against this defense. And that's something that the 49ers are going to have to sharpen up. Chase Young is going to have to sharpen up. The tackling on the corners, I thought that was an issue throughout the game. Ambry Thomas again. So all of that has to get better. And I think the 49ers' hope is that one game that they had to sort of get back into the flow of things will be enough so that they're ready for the Lions on Sunday.
So, Matt, Dave Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are going to try to have their field day, and Niners are pretty good deep. The problem is Lions don't really go deep that often. Maybe Josh Reynolds is an exception. What answers, if any, are they going to have for Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Well, I thought that one of the good things to come out of the Green Bay game is that Dre Greenlaw looked a lot like his 2021, 2022 self. He and Fred Warner played really well. Like I said, I thought Eric Armstead, I was kind of looking for rust on him. He looked like he was shot out of a cannon. He looked great, like somebody who had really sort of taken advantage of the rest and had fresh legs. So I think that he's going to be, great, good pressure up the middle. I'm not sure whether Javon Hargrave had that same pressure. But those two together, if they're both firing on all cylinders, then you're disrupting Jared Goff from the center of the line. Historically, that's been a great way to kind of get any quarterback, particularly Goff, off of his game. So I think that's going to be key. I think the 49ers are going to win this game. I mean, on paper, they match up really well against the Lions. The Lions' defense isn't great. But we also, thought that about the Packers. The Packers didn't have a great passing defense throughout the season. And yet Brock Purdy was obviously uncomfortable throwing against them right off the bat, almost threw that pick to Darnell Savage on the first drive. And from that point on, he just looked hesitant. He did not look confident. And I think that the rain played a part in that. I think that the soft coverage that the Packers were using took away a lot of the Brandon Ayuk stuff. No Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel would have been a real asset in a game like Saturday's, where Purdy's not going deep very much. Like I said, soft coverage. That's a Deebo game. No Deebo, all of a sudden that changes things up. So there were a lot of sort of understandable elements to why Purdy didn't have a great game. I think that the 49ers, knowing who's going to be out there on Sunday, a fair weather outing, I think all of those things are going to be in Brock Purdy's favor.
Yeah. Matt, on the Deebo front, I agree with you because I think McCaffrey ran the ball pretty well, and they didn't quite get the balance that they normally have. But if Deebo's in, maybe there's 4 or 5 Deebo runs that I also think just make the Niners that much more explosive and take 5 passing attempts away, and that gets closer to the balance that they look for.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Finding balance on offense is the key. I mean, that's what the Packers did. I think that was one of the sort of underlying themes of that game. In the run up, it was all about how suddenly Matt LaFleur can run the Shanahan offense. He doesn't have Aaron Rodgers there anymore. He doesn't have to kind of lean on what Rodgers likes and what Rodgers has done in the past. He can run a version of that offense that looks a lot like how Shanahan did for a while. I wrote this on Twitter that he was out Shanahan. Some of those play calls were fantastic. The touchdown to Kraft, the tight end, he was wide open, and they followed that up with a 2-point conversion to Aaron Jones. He was wide open. And 49ers said afterwards that LaFleur was pulling plays out of his playbook that they just hadn't seen before on tape. So it was really, that's something also to take into account. They were playing a team that was performing at its peak. And there was a really good chemistry between play caller and quarterback and play caller and the offense. And the 49ers kind of took those blows and they won the game. And they can move on. So, the question is whether the Lions are playing at the same rate, the same sense of rhythm as the Packers were.
So here we go. Fun fact, the last time the Lions won a conference title game was against the Niners on the road back in the 50s, I believe. So were
you there for that, Dave? Did you watch that one in person?
As a matter of fact, I was. Popcorn was great. Let me tell you, it was amazing. Can the 49ers, not can they, of course they can. Would you still feel the same? You said earlier the Niners are going to win this game. You think they're going to win this game. Do you feel the same way if Debo doesn't play?
Yeah, I do. Because like I said, losing Debo in the second quarter, which is what happened, is different than not having Debo all week and knowing that you're not going to have Debo Samuel. The game plan just is different. The play calls are different. So, I think the 49ers would be basically better prepared for not having him, obviously. And there's just so many other stars on this team. You saw George Kittle led the team in receiving. And that can happen against the Lions as well. That's another theme, is that they keep playing teams that don't have the greatest linebackers in the world. And you would think that a 49ers team can really kind of feast on that. So obviously having Debo is much better, but knowing that you're not going to have him, I think it's better than the situation on Saturday.
How did you think overall Shanahan's game plan was, and how he coached that game?
Yeah, that's part of it. I think when you lose Debo Samuel, that changes things. I think, if Brock Purdy is uncomfortable and not, throwing the ball as accurately as he normally does because of the rain, that sort of makes the play caller look bad as well. So I think all of that factored in. The big coaching decision that I questioned was, why they decided to kind of challenge the Packers on those kick returns. It seemed like the 49ers had concluded at the end of the season, like the last third of the season, say, they decided, okay, this kickoff trick that we're trying where Moody kicks it short into the corner, and they love the fact that Moody can do that. That's one of the reasons they drafted him in the third round. He's good on kickoff. He can put the ball wherever he wants. But they just don't have the guys to cover it. And so they decided to challenge the Green Bay Packers, who had one of the best kick returners in the league. And they were terrible at it. There's no two ways about it. And so by the end of the game, they went back to let's just do touchbacks every time. And that's been a question I get all the time. Does Moody have the leg to do a touchback every time? Yes, he does. He absolutely does. But they choose not to a lot of the time because he also can put it into that corner. But boy, it just seems like a gamble not worth taking, given what we've seen all season and what we saw on Saturday.
Matt, how would you grade Kyle Shanahan on Saturday? Yeah.
I mean, the whole team seemed off. I mean, out of rhythm, didn't come out well. But I do know that they were sort of guarding against that. They knew that was a possibility, and I think that Shanahan did everything in his power to make sure that they didn't fall out of rhythm, but it didn't work. It's a good question because their whole season was geared on, let's just get the number one seed. If we get the number one seed, then we get all that rest and we get home field advantage. And so they get all that rest and it works against them, and they get home field advantage. And then it works against them too, because they play on this wet field, and the Packers are fine on the field. I saw one Packers slip. It was Aaron Jones, and he was sort of running laterally and tried to make a cut, and he slipped. And the 49ers were slipping and sliding everywhere. I mean, that field affected one team, and it happened to be the home team. So my point is, even your wildest dreams, your number one goal, you succeed on it, and even that can sort of backfire on you.
Matt Barrows writes for The Athletic. No one does it better. He will be out there Championship Sunday, hoping to punch a ticket to Las Vegas, just like those 50-plus players and the rest of the coaching staff for the San Francisco 49ers. Relax, rest